Dementia and Alzheimer's doesn't start when somebody begins forgetting names or losing their way home. It starts decades earlier, slowly and silently, while the brain is still trying to compensate. We tend to think of dementia as something that just happens later in life, but the truth is Alzheimer's and other forms of cognitive decline begin with subtle shifts: brain fog, word recall issues, difficulty concentrating, or losing track of conversations. And these aren't just annoying, they are early warning signs that the brain is under pressure. And while genetics can play a role, they're not the destiny. In fact, research suggests that as much as 90% of Alzheimer's risk is driven by lifestyle or environmental factors and not your DNA. Hi, my name is Lisa Ande Garcia, and I help people optimize their brain health so they can feel calm, focused, and productive. And if that sounds like something you want more in your life, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you don't miss any of the tools and education I will be sharing each week. Today, we are going to look at one of the most overlooked contributors to neurological decline, which are toxins. And I'm going to show you which ones are most strongly associated with Alzheimer's and cognitive dysfunction, how they impact the brain, and what you can do to reduce your exposure and support your body's ability to eliminate them. I want to preface this by saying that I started out all of my work around the brain was started around children, because I have a now 24-year-old with moderate to severe autism or intellectual delay or whatever. I have a 26-year-old that always struggled with severe ADD. If you're a parent, you know that once kids are about teenagers, it's really hard to help them because they have to be able to follow through and help themselves. And so that's kind of where we are. I was a learning specialist forever, and so I have always been around children and child development, and I understand how all of these things impact learning. However, recently I have been really thrown into the whole senior aspect of things. My mother now is in memory care. She always lived alone, out of state. We've had a very interesting and difficult growing up experience. In fact, there was a 25-year period where we didn't even know where she was. She's 75, so when she was little, I'm kind of saying all this hopefully to create some kind of context, but she was born in an era, when she was born, her mother had already been in remission from cancer. Her mother had gone through chemo, and my mother is the youngest. Her siblings are much older than her, and so I kind of just put two and two together a few years ago and just go, oh my gosh, I know kind of what's wrong, because she grew up with like every special or learning difficulty that is out there, and in an era when people didn't know anything about learning disabilities. She had a very hard life because she really struggled. She struggled in jobs. She struggled, and people didn't believe her. They thought she was making things up or whatever, but her struggles were real. It made being a single mom. She was a single mom, and there's three of us. It was a very, we've talked about in other videos about fight or flight. She never really had use of her frontal lobe very much, and so she was always living out of her brainstem, always overwhelmed, and that caused a very abusive relationship or a situation at home. And I didn't really understand at the time, I knew that she struggled in jobs and stuff. I just, at the time I didn't really understand anything about learning disabilities or whatever. It was once I started kind of studying, once I was in college and I started studying things, I kind of started putting two and two together, and I won't go into the entire history. But now, a couple months ago, she was calling, maybe around January, she was calling me and telling me some really weird things that I thought was happening in her. She lived in a senior building in Michigan, and it was an enclosed building. So the senior apartments, you had to walk in through a lock. You had to be buzzed in and stuff, and it was an enclosed door. So the thing she was telling me was kind of weird, but she was telling me things about being in her building, things that I just couldn't imagine that was really happening, but I was actually frightened for her, and so it got to the point where I'm okay, I just drove out instead, just with the intention of bringing her back out, thinking that she was in a very a potentially violent situation. And I even almost went to the police to get escorted and all that. But anyway, to make a long story short, I know it's too late, but she was just hallucinating after all of that. So all those strange things that we didn't understand that was happening, she was hallucinating. And so I still had to bring her out. We moved her out here, put her in assisted living. Well, within a month, it just went downhill really fast. She's now in memory care. Today she was just at the ER because she had fallen again in the middle of the night. And anyway, so I moved her out at the end of February. That was the last day we were there, and it's right now, I'm recording this, it's mid-May. It's like everything's just happening like all like really fast. I see that, and she's only 75. I'm 55. And so I have been really realizing that all of the work that I've been doing around the brain, I've been doing a lot of work about brain development, how to get things online. I've been working with kids and doing movement stuff, but really with elderly people, it's like I almost don't know what to do. It's the same principles, but like with my mom, she's like too fragile. I can't do, and she has other structural things going on, so I can't do the things that I would normally do with like kids or younger people or even adults who just have their structure, it's basically, I'm afraid to break her, and I don't want to get into that. So this whole thing about Alzheimer's, her sisters died with it. They were much older, but they died with Alzheimer's. They died, from different things. You usually die with it, not from it. And so I know it's like inevitable genetic wise, but with all the stuff that I've been learning about the brain, I know that it's not inevitable if I'm able to really hone in on my lifestyle choices, my environment, the toxins. The problem is that these days, everybody, all the time, if you notice, they're spraying harder in the skies than they ever have. The foods are more poison than they ever have been. The water is more, smells like chlorine, just coming out of the tap more than it ever has been. So we are really fighting this battle with toxins. A lot of my son, who's with the autism and intellectual delay, when he was little and I was studying all of this in the beginning, the researchers were already saying people who have Alzheimer's today, if they were born now, they would basically be autistic because the genetic predisposition of reacting to these toxins are really strong, but they had a lifetime of basically their environment was clean. They just had a little, the buildup was slow over time. And whereas if they were born now, all the pollutants are like one hard hit and they would be, I know my mom for sure. I mean, with what she had, if she was born today, she would be a mess. Would have been a mess as a child. She was already a mess as a child, but she would have been a mess. I'm not sure how I turned out the way I did because I'm the oldest for her. So I guess I got all of her good vitamins and minerals because my brothers also did suffer from different things as well. So that's why, and I haven't even started talking about what I'm going to talk about, but, most people just think that Alzheimer's, runs in the family, and it definitely can and definitely does, but it's not a normal part of aging. It's kind of a new thing. It wasn't really a big part of aging in the past, so we do know that toxins and lifestyle has a lot to do with it. And so the toxins are the environmental triggers that interfere with brain function long before the diagnosis ever happens. And so it's really important that we become aware of what they are so we can try to avoid them as much as possible without being, without it causing, because sometimes we can get too fanatic about it and it can cause us stress, and that's alone just going to make us sick anyway. So we have to, try to balance that. But if you're dealing with brain fog, forgetfulness, or mental fatigue now, those may be early signs that your brain is asking for some support. So after that really long-winded introduction, my name is Lisa Ann de Garcia, and I help people restore and protect their brain health so that they can feel calm, focused, and productive for life. And if you're ready to move beyond symptom management and actually understand what your brain needs to thrive, please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss whatever is coming next. Today we will talk about the toxins associated with Alzheimer's and neurological decline, what they are, where they come from, and what you can do today to reduce your exposure and support your body's ability to clear them out. So let's start with one of the most well-documented toxin, and that is aluminum. In fact, I have a right here. I'm gonna turn around. I have all my books here. These are not even all my books. These are a fraction. Out in the hallway is where my bookshelves are, but this is where I put some of my, I'm not even sure if you can really see them in the video, but here's a book called Imagine You Are an Aluminum Atom, Discussions with Mr. Aluminum. So Christopher Exley, I guess they call him Mr. Aluminum. Aluminum is a neurotoxic metal that's been found in elevated levels in the brain of people with Alzheimer's, and it doesn't belong in your body. And it's hiding in your antiperspirants, in your cookware, baking powders, over-the-counter medications, and even in the vaccines. While science isn't conclusive about causation, definitely causation as in like aluminum and dementia, but it's pretty well known that it causes a lot of brain issues. Aluminum just doesn't have anywhere to do with it. And one of the problems is, we were talking about spraying in the skies. If you haven't started noticing that and looking at that, start looking up in the skies. And if you see a blue sky, just go, oh my goodness, yay. Okay. And then the next day, you're for sure going to start seeing you'll either see if you look early enough, and sometimes they do it overnight, sometimes it's in the morning, but sometimes you'll see they're spraying the lines. And if you watch, you start to see it dissipate. And then eventually you'll just see this thin haze over your entire sky, and you're like, oh, it's really hazy out today. But now, ever since last July, I noticed that now the clouds are getting really strange. So they've changed the chemical structure, but in that spray, has always been part of that spray has always been nanonized aluminum. And nanonized aluminum means that it can easily get into your lungs. So whatever, eventually it's going to come down either with the rain or whatever. And you can see a lot of crops be affected. There's a YouTube video called movie documentary thing. It's maybe an hour long or an hour, 2 hours long. It's called What in the World Are They Spraying? And that was, I think I learned about that in 2018 or 19, and that was already 10 years old. It's probably about 15 years old now. But they, were testing in trees in the forest and everything about how it was affected by aluminum. So it's a really big deal. And so if it's in the skies, it's going to, be coming down. And I do have a garden outside, and I would like to think it's an organic garden, but I know better because I know that when it gets rained on, that's not organic. So anyway, aluminum disrupts the brain by affecting or interfering with energy production, promoting oxidative stress, damaging neurons, particularly in areas involved with memory like the hippocampus. So one of the things you can do is you can switch to aluminum-free deodorants. Yeah, you try, if you're not toxic, you don't even need deodorant. None of us we don't use it. I have there's a crystal one. It's like a rock, mineral deodorant that I was using. But if you are not toxic, when you sweat, it won't smell. So if you want to be honest with yourself, whoever's watching me, if you have a lot of body odor, then you know that you have a lot of toxins built up in your body, and you're going to need to start getting rid of those toxins because they are going to affect you. So deodorants do have aluminum. Normally, they typically do. So you'll see aluminum-free deodorant. Avoid cooking and storing food in aluminum foil. I was pretty bad. I don't have aluminum cookware, but I was realizing the other day, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I was like, you know what? When we were heating up some meat or something in the toaster oven, we'd put it on the aluminum foil so it wouldn't, all the grease and stuff, it would stay. And I said, wait a minute, what am I doing? Because even aluminum foil, if you notice when you cook, it turns black or whatever. And I was like, well, okay, what can I do instead? And I was like, oh, we have the Pyrex dishes. Because if I cook in my oven, it's bigger, I'll use a dish. But in the little toaster oven, I'm thinking, why am I still using aluminum foil for that, even though I know better? So get one of those little Pyrex dishes, and that's what I'm using. So sometimes what happens is we do things out of convenience, and we are not thinking about how it's going to affect us. So for aluminum, don't cook the food in the aluminum foil, because then the aluminum can leach out of it. If you have had long-term exposure to aluminum, or then you want to talk to a practitioner about gentle chelation or detox support and what you can do, what's good to help get aluminum out of your body. And so there's some things that you can do about that. So we had aluminum. Next is glyphosate. Glyphosate. Oh my gosh, if you haven't heard about glyphosate by now, obviously you knew what aluminum was because it's just a metal. But glyphosate is an active ingredient in Roundup and other herbicides. And it's used on conventional produce, grains, and even non-organic oats. What it was doing is it's a pesticide, right? I just think it's just so ridiculous, because Roundup, first of all, isn't just glyphosate. It's a bunch of chemicals, but they've isolated that glyphosate causes cancer and causes all these things. However, just like anything else, imagine you're putting glyphosate, or you have some kind of poison, but then you're putting it in 26 other poisons. You don't think that poison now is even stronger because it's now in with a bunch of other poisons? And so they have a lot of, they've had a lot of lawsuits. But what glyphosate was originally is it was created or discovered or whatever it is they were stripping these big metal boilers or something, and it was to strip all the corrosion on the inside, to strip it out. So just imagine what that's doing to your body. So the glyphosate is getting on all of our foods, all the wheat, all, it's everything's, it's being sprayed. If somebody, and it goes, goes downwind. So if you're downwind from a farm, and believe it or not, if you live near a farm like in the Midwest, people who live near farms are actually more contaminated than people who can even live in the city. We just have different toxins. But people who live near farms, conventional farms, they have a very toxic with herbicides and pesticides and things leaching in their water and everything. If you live near like organic farming and like in the Amish country or something like that, not like that, but it's like I'm going to guess like Iowa and Indiana and Illinois that have all these big giant cornfields and stuff like that. But glyphosate, so it's really stripping, if you imagine, it's stripping the insides of your gut. It's, creating leaky gut. It's killing your microbes. It's doing all these things. I mean, it is a pesticide, right? Or an herbicide. So it's killing all your stuff inside your body. And it also can penetrate the blood-brain barrier. It allows more toxins to enter the brain, or it can trigger inflammation and immune activation. So to reduce your glyphosate load, first of all, you want to prioritize organic produce, okay? If there has never been a time in your life that you need to just start eating organic, it's like now. And so look online for the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. Those are the Dirty Dozen is a list of 12 most contaminated fruits and vegetables. And the Clean 15 are the ones that are the least contaminated. A lot of times because certain fruits don't need pesticides or herbicides. They kind of grow anyway. They're pretty resilient. Avoid conventionally grown wheat and oats. They're heavily sprayed. So look for, again, organic oats, organic wheat. They're very heavily sprayed. And what happens is even if things are, say like they're organically grown, they can still be sprayed after they've been cut. Then I'm not sure how that's helpful. Support your detox pathways. Think minerals, fiber, and consistent hydration. So you want your detox pathways, things like bitter herbs to stimulate your liver, clean out your liver. You're going to want to give your liver some love often because all these chemicals have to go through the liver and to get cleaned out. And also another thing for glyphosate is humic acid and fulvic acid. So if you take humic and fulvic acid as your mineral source, that is going to help chelate or bind to the glyphosate and to get it out of your body. So you really want that. And make sure you're drinking water. Another one that you might not think about is mold or mycotoxins. So you might kind of lost what we're talking about. We're talking about Alzheimer's, we're talking about toxins, and related to Alzheimer's, we talked about aluminum, we talked about glyphosate, and another one is mycotoxins or mold toxins. These are produced by mold spores and can become airborne, embedding into furniture, HVAC systems, or drywall. People exposed to mold, especially in water-damaged homes, can develop something called neurotoxic syndrome. Symptoms include brain fog, poor short-term memory, headaches, word-finding issues, and emotional instability. Mold toxins trigger systemic inflammation and suppress the immune system. They also damage the mitochondria, which are vital for energy production and brain cells. So if you suspect mold, don't ignore it. Simple air purifiers aren't enough. You may need professional testing for your home and functional testing for your body to see if mycotoxins are accumulating. You can also get Briotech is a hypochlorous acid, and they even have foggers like for mold. But if you live in a moldy environment, you need to get out, or you need to completely restore it. Mold is really bad for you. And actually, if you're having things that are persistent that keep coming back, you need to suspect mold in your body and really address that, or see if that needs to be addressed. But really think back in your history, like where in my life did I live, or did I work, or did I go to school in a place that was super musty? And you might not even notice the mold, but most of you are going, yeah, I know, I was like I grew up in a very damp, moldy environment. Okay. Now, we can't forget mercury, right? Mercury is a common exposure from dental amalgams. There's some people who had their dental amalgams since they were little. Those are the metal fillings. They are, I think, 50% mercury, because it's just mercury is, so pliable. That's why they used it. It's not just mercury. It's mercury and nickel and silver or something. I don't know what else is in it. But also fish, right? Certain kinds of fish and vaccines, especially the older ones, they did take it out in some of them. The problem with mercury and vaccines and things is the vaccine companies, they got smart too. Like if they say, oh yeah, we're not going to put mercury in it. So what they do is they say, oh, we're putting, I don't know, XYZ in it. Well, they bought XYZ from this other company, and the other company might have created XYZ with mercury, but since they sold it to them as XYZ, then the pharmaceutical company only has to say they have XYZ, and you don't really know that mercury is one of the ingredients is XYZ. That's why it's still really hard to know, even if it says, oh yeah, we took out the maresol or the mercury, it's still kind of in there. or could be in there. We know for sure aluminum's in there, but mercury could or might not be in there. But mercury damages neuron structure, it disrupts neurotransmitter signaling, it contributes to long-term brain inflammation. Even low-level chronic exposure can create slow burn of cognitive decline over time. So you need to choose low mercury fish like salmon, sardines, and trout. Avoid tuna and swordfish if mercury is an issue for you, or tuna just every once in a while. If you have silver fillings, just work with a biological dentist to get them removed. Biological dentists will remove them safely. A regular dentist won't really know the procedures to avoid getting them removed. If you are pregnant, do not remove your silver fillings until after you're finished nursing. It's better to leave them in than to kind of stir up the hornet's nest while you're pregnant or nursing. So make sure that you don't do that. Or remove them 6 months before you plan on getting pregnant. Okay, you do want to be careful of that. Support your body's natural detox systems through sweat, fiber-rich foods, and mineral replenishment. So these toxins, they don't act alone, right? So we talked about the synergistic effect of things. And also, if your detox pathways are sluggish, your minerals are depleted, and you're under chronic stress, these toxins can stay in circulation longer, and your brain becomes long-term storage unit of these toxins. Something that you should know, you don't have to be symptomatic for damage to be happening. So toxin accumulation is often silent, and symptoms like forgetfulness, irritability, and word recall, those kind of begin first, and just eventually it kind of snowballs, and eventually, maybe decades later, you get a formal diagnosis. So things just happen, so whenever there's a diagnosis, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, whatever the diagnosis, that did not just happen overnight. Sometimes it took 20, 30 years for it to snowball. So if you aren't experiencing any symptoms right now, or you are experiencing some symptoms that maybe go, I'm really worried about where this is going, you need to start right now, because it's so much easier to undo it where you are than to undo it later, especially because the more sick you are, and no matter what you have, whether it's dementia, whether it's a brain thing or a cancer thing or whatever, when you are sick and you are not feeling well, it's really hard to get yourself to feel well when you're in that state. So you need to really start now. Your body is designed to detoxify naturally, and your brain is designed to regenerate. You just have to reduce the load and support the exit routes, right? So we need to kind of get rid of stop putting gasoline on the fire, right? And give the body what it needs in order for it to do it on its own. So choose filtered water. Yeah, no plastic bottles, and never put plastic water bottle like in the heat or in a car, like a hot car. Don't drink that plastic water. Unless you are dying, right? Make sure that your water's in glass. If it's in plastic, it's cool and cold, because that plastic leaches into your water. Use glass or stainless steel containers instead of plastic aluminum. Sweat regularly, exercise, sauna, get enough fiber to bind and move those toxins out. Replenish your minerals, especially magnesium, zinc, and selenium, to support cellular repair. Prioritize sleep. The lymphatic system is in the brain, and it helps clear waste out of the brain. So if you're not sleeping well, your toxins can accumulate in your brain. I just did a whole other video on that. If you want to go deeper, I offer testing and analysis to identify what's impacting your brain, and whether that's, heavy metals or a mineral imbalance, or if you have recent blood work, a lot of times the doctor says that you're all fine, but they're looking at the wrong ranges. So if you want me to take a look at your blood work so I can see some of the hidden opportunities, we can do all of that. But we'll just build a personalized plan to get you thinking clearly again, feeling like yourself again, protecting your brain long term. If this video has helped you connect the dots a little bit, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you are ready for answers and not just awareness, then click the link in the description to book a free call with me, and we are going to see what your brain is holding on to, what we can do to start letting it go. You are not just preventing decline, you are building resilience, and your brain is absolutely worth protecting. So let's do it now. Anyway, that was a little glitch. I will see you next week in our next video. Bye-bye.